41. Birthday party. 11. It wasn't easy to get down to the base of the treehouse, so naturally all the boys went up to visit it. Draco had to change, though, so the girls could only rest under the tree for the time being. A child's feelings change quickly. By the time Draco climbed down the ladder in a miniature Quidditch uniform, he had already forgotten the earlier spat with Samantha, or perhaps Quidditch simply captured his attention more. He showed the boys his complete collection of children's brooms and generously lent one to each of them. Blaze, Crab, and Goyle each picked out the broom they wanted, but not declined. He said he wasn't very interested, produced a potions book from somewhere, and sat in the shade beneath the tree as if no one else existed. The remaining 4 boys had to form 2 teams. Draco originally wanted Blaze as his teammate, but Blaze's earlier coldness toward him, plus his talking with Samantha, had put Draco out of sorts. So Draco tried to pick the bigger Goyle instead, only to discover Blaze had his eye on Goyle as well. "This is my house, and it's my birthday today, so I should pick first," Draco snapped. "If that's the case, Goyle should decide for himself," Blaze said calmly, turning to Goyle. "If you join my team, I'll buy you a Honeyduke's grand gift package. And if our team wins, I'll add a new model children's broom. How about it?" Goyle barely hesitated before stepping behind Blaze. Draco's face flushed pale red. He wanted to offer something more generous to win Goyle over, but Lucius and Narcissa didn't spoil him unconditionally, and his pocket money wasn't as generous as Mrs. Zabini's. Besides, most of his allowance went to prank products intended to tease Samantha, though he'd never managed to pull off any of his schemes. In the end, Draco teamed up with Crab. The 4 boys darted back and forth across the small field with great enthusiasm. By 3 in the afternoon, everyone was sweating. Both sides had scored and lost points. The children's Quidditch rules were fairly simple. Blaze and Draco each served as both chaser and seeker, while Crab and Goyle acted as goalkeepers for their respective sides. For safety, the children's sets omitted bludgers, so there were no beaters. The match almost became a showcase for Blaze and Draco. Not only were the 3 girls watching from the edge of the field, but even the ladies having afternoon tea in the garden could see what was happening. Blaze passed the quaffle with ease and scored past Crab, giving his side an early lead. Draco was striking, too. His throws were more accurate, but Goyle's size meant that even when he couldn't catch the quaffle, he could always block it with his body, keeping Draco slightly behind on points. In the end, though, Draco caught the golden snitch and won by a hair. Dobby appeared at just the right moment, using a charm to wipe the boys' sweat from their foreheads and presenting the ladies' small prize for the winner, a freshly picked purple iris enchanted with a sticking charm. Draco held the flower with a little contempt. He really didn't want to pin it to his lapel. He worried it would make him look like a little girl. He glanced left and right, Pansy Parkinson's eager gaze on one side, Daphne sitting with Knot and whispering on the other, and felt there wasn't anyone suitable to give it to. "Author, I think that among his peers, Blaze Zabini is one of the few boys in Slytherin who can stand on equal footing with Draco and be his match, though they're not rivals." Slughorn's attitude in the original work makes this clear. Author. He reopened the Slug Club and immediately invited Blaze, but did not invite Draco because of Lucius's imprisonment and the Malfoy family's decline. That was a great humiliation for Draco. 42. Birthday party. 12. Giving a girl flowers was easily misinterpreted, and his parents might scold him again. After a moment's thought, Draco simply tossed the purple iris into Samantha's arms. "It's for you," he said. Samantha was used to his habit of throwing things away. Almost everything Draco had given her over the past 6 years was something he didn't want. Broken toy brooms that wouldn't fly, music boxes that no longer played, Quidditch figurines missing an arm. Most of it had ended up in the trash. This iris, however, was one of the few things that remained intact. "Next, we should play Forest Treasure Hunt," Draco announced. He had learned his lesson and quickly tugged Goyle to his side. 2 per group. Team up quickly. Blaze Zabini smiled, ignoring Crab and Goyle, and walked straight over to Samantha. "A team?" "Okay," Samantha said. Draco opened his mouth to object, but realized this wasn't Quidditch, and he didn't need a hulking, slow partner. Goyle would be more of a hindrance in the woods than a help. Knot paired off with Daphne, leaving only Pansy and Crab. Crab looked bewildered while Pansy scowled at him. "We're a team, Master Malfoy," she cried. "Let Crab and Goyle be a team." Draco hesitated a moment between Goyle and Pansy, then stuck with Goyle. The little Malfoy wood came alive. Dobby had already cleared away any real dangers and hidden enchanted treasures in tree knots, branches, and rock crevices. Narcissa had prepared a supply of tiny enchanted stars. The instant you touched one, it vanished, leaving a sparkling mark on your arm. Blaze spent most of the hunt adjusting Samantha's inconvenient skirt, while Samantha used her familiarity with the grounds to spot the faint traces of the stars. By dinner time, they each had more than a dozen star marks, subtle on Samantha's skin, but striking against Blaze's chocolate-colored forearm. Unsurprisingly, the prize went to Blaze and Samantha. Blaze tucked an enchanted blue anemone, a prize from the ladies, into Samantha's pinned-up hair and admired it for a long, satisfied moment. "This blue suits your eyes and your dress even better," he said. Samantha smiled, suddenly remembering the purple iris Draco had given her earlier. "Where did that flower I had go?" "I didn't notice," Blaze said apologetically. "Perhaps it fell into a bush on the way." "That's all right," Samantha said. "I'm just forgetful." They walked back toward the Malfoy Manor, chatting and laughing. The wood fell quiet again as the children left. A squirrel came back to its nest, clutching the berries it had foraged, and found a purple iris roughly stuffed under the straw, clearly hidden there on purpose. If lunch and the afternoon's playtime had been hors d'oeuvres, then the evening's banquet was the real feast. Piles of guests made Samantha feel faintly dizzy. Draco was even less steady. Lucius greeted people in a mechanical way, nodding and offering the same polite phrases, but he couldn't place half the faces. The heap of gifts that had been in the garden earlier had multiplied until it nearly blocked the main walk. Dobby had no choice but to have most of them carted out to the lawn of the playing field used that afternoon. The presents had come not only from wizards, but from many muggles as well. The Malfoys did business with royalty, and Lucius even held a muggle peerage. Malfoy Manor had a muggle mailing address. The postman for the area was long used to the household's cold, taciturn old butler. He didn't know that the butler was Dobby under a confundus charm. The evening guests weren't as imposing as the pure-blood families who had arrived earlier in the day. Despite Samantha's awkward position in the family, many ladies and young women still came over to greet her, offering compliments and flattery. "Look at Miss Malfoy's hair, such a unique style. I've never seen anything like that updo," one witch cooed. Samantha smiled. They hadn't seen it before, because it was the kind of updo she often threw her hair into when she passed as a muggle in her old life. Should she tell them a Malfoy daughter was wearing a muggle hairstyle? She kept quiet. "And that anemone fits perfectly. As expected of the Malfoys, such exquisite taste," another added. Samantha felt a little undeserving of the praise. She suspected the flower pairing was Blaze's doing. "Those eyes," a third woman murmured. "They're simply beautiful with that blue dress." That pleased Samantha. Her eyes, inherited from her birth mother, had always been her favorite feature. Then a high shriek cut through the warm murmur of voices. Pansy Parkinson was pointing at a corner of Samantha's skirt. "Look, why is her skirt changing color?" she cried. A low ripple of whispers rose around them. Women clustered together, their comments loud enough for everyone to hear. The color-changing spell must have failed. "I never expected a Malfoy daughter to stoop to such crude tricks. How tacky," one said. Narcissa's face was composed, but a mocking smile flickered in her eyes. Lucius frowned at Samantha and raised his wineglass in an attempt to steer conversation elsewhere. Samantha didn't flinch. She'd expected something like this. When Dobby cast the charm earlier, she'd already been thinking ahead. She wouldn't let herself, or the Malfoy name, be the butt of the room's amusement. "Miss Parkinson, I didn't know your eyes were so sharp," Samantha said calmly, looking directly at Pansy with a composed smile. "But actually, this isn't an ordinary color-changing charm. It's part of a little experiment Father and I have been working on." She turned slightly toward Narcissa and lifted one hand in a conciliatory gesture. "Father and I were trying to make a dress that changes color with light and time. We were going to gift the final version to you as a surprise, mostly Father's idea." The whispering thinned into curious silence. Samantha's tone was steady and confident. The little speech had the effect she intended. People inclined their heads as if intrigued, and Pansy's triumphant smirk faltered. Another explanation. Narcissa's primary intention for tonight had always been to spotlight her son. Draco was the center of the evening. Everyone else was a foil, and that included an illegitimate daughter who was never meant to be noticed. Samantha's very presence and pretty face were already a blemish in the way Narcissa saw the family. A small problem with a dress was nothing in comparison. The dress itself had not been cheap. It simply had a dark color that didn't flatter Samantha, and lace at the cuffs and hem that made any active movement likely to look awkward. The real embarrassment, if any, would be Samantha's awkwardness, not the quality of the gown. Samantha had been the one to forget to try it on before the morning of the party, discovering too late that it didn't fit and losing the chance to have it altered. It had also been Samantha's idea to change the dress's color herself so she would stand out. None of those choices had been orchestrated by Narcissa. When Narcissa realized Samantha had altered the dress, she chose not to expose her. If Samantha's small assertion of independence earned Lucius's disapproval, that was a price Narcissa was willing to pay, far preferable to drawing attention to her own preparations. If questioned later, Narcissa could always say she had been too busy to remember the exact color she'd purchased, and therefore hadn't had the chance to catch the issue before the banquet. "I thought she'd tried it on," she could say. If she didn't like it, why didn't she speak up? It was the most expensive one in the shop. Such an explanation would shift the fault. Neither Narcissa nor the Malfoy name would be stained. Guests would only take away that Samantha was difficult, pretentious, and unsuited to the family's standards, an impression Narcissa was perfectly comfortable letting stand. 44. Birthday Party, bonus chapter. After we secretly discussed it that day, we simply experimented with my dress. It was my carelessness. I not only forgot about it, I ruined the surprise for Madame ahead of time. Samantha's wide, innocent eyes blinked, softening even the onlookers. And what she said made sense. Sensible enough, in fact, to be far more convincing than the idea that the Malfoy heiress couldn't afford a gown. From the moment she had asked Dobby to change the dress's color, she had already planned this explanation down to the smallest detail. Had she played the victim and claimed the gown Narcissa had bought was unsuitable, that would have been the worst possible move. It would have suggested discord within the Malfoy household, made her and Narcissa the subject of gossip, even ridicule, and given Lucius reason to think she lacked proper decorum. By blaming herself now, she painted Lucius as a doting husband, reinforced the image of the Malfoys as a loving couple, and highlighted a close father-daughter relationship with Lucius. It killed several birds with one stone. Lucius would never expose her in public. He might question her later, but she could answer honestly then. Narcissa would be even less likely to make a scene in front of guests. She would simply play the virtuous wife and forgiving mother, quickly pardoning Samantha's little oversight. As for whether a spell could make a dress change with light and time, who would scrutinize that at a dinner party? Sure enough, almost as soon as Samantha finished, Narcissa smiled and placed a calming hand on her shoulder. "It's nothing serious, Sasha. Don't worry about it," she said, giving Lucius a reproving look that was full of affection and 3 parts exasperation. Samantha marveled at the depth of Narcissa's acting. If she hadn't been the one who concocted the lie, Narcissa's expression could have convinced her it was all true. "It seems you're doing very well, Sissy," came a somewhat aged but sharp voice. Everyone in the hall turned toward the double doors. A man was walking up the main path across the courtyard. He wasn't extremely old, but his health looked fragile. He leaned on a cane, topped with a sphere set with black and green diamonds. Up close, the setting suggested winding vines or snakes. His back was slightly hunched, his steps small and slow, but his eyes shone with a keen, unyielding light that made people reluctant to meet his gaze. "Father," Narcissa said immediately, hurrying to greet him with Lucius close behind. The hall fell silent. Cygnus Black had arrived late, but no one dared show displeasure in his presence. Draco straightened nervously as his mother addressed the newcomer. Samantha, on the other hand, wished she could disappear altogether, praying that the man wouldn't remember her. "Your relationship is very good. That's excellent," Cygnus said as he entered, Narcissa supporting his arm while Lucius walked a half step in front of them. "But don't forget," he added, his voice sharp, "your sister is still suffering in Azkaban. How long has it been since you visited her?" Everyone had expected his first words to be about his grandson, whom he had never met, but instead he reprimanded his daughter. The reprimand hung in the room like a chill, unsettling the polite celebration. Small note, there was no official description of Cygnus found in this section, so I took the liberty of creating one. I hope it doesn't feel out of place. Author, many thanks to Mushi Yan for becoming a member, adding an extra chapter. 45. Birthday Party, 15. Narcissa was clearly startled, but she didn't lose her composure. "I'll go at once, father," she said. As soon as she finished, she turned almost eagerly toward Draco, shifting the subject. "Draco, come meet your maternal grandfather." "Maternal grandfather?" Draco repeated, then stepped forward to greet the old man properly. He was noticeably more nervous than before. This man did not seem kind. He had already been somewhat unpleasant to his mother. Cygnus Black observed them. "Sissy, you've done well in this matter, producing the Malfoy heir." His eyes swept over Lucius as they lingered on his son, then widened on the assembled guests. Lucius immediately replied, staying pleasant on the surface. "Indeed, I was even telling Sissy this morning that although today is Draco's birthday, the one who's worked hardest is actually Sissy." Lucius's words were warm, but beneath the smile his composure was thinning. Though he showed no outward sign, Samantha knew him well enough to tell he was close to losing his temper. This was the Malfoy house. Lucius Malfoy was its master. Who was Cygnus Black to stride in and act the elder only when it suited him? Cygnus, however, remained cold and indifferent. He looked the boy over once more without even a hint of concern, more as if he were appraising the worth of the future Malfoy heir. Then his gaze landed on Samantha standing beside Lucius. "Since you know Sissy's hardship," Cygnus said to Lucius with a sharp tone, "you should be more careful, Lucius." He added, voice flat and unforgiving, "Men may take their pleasures where they please, but fathering a bastard is simply careless." Samantha was almost speechless. What a twisted standard. According to him, men of pureblood families could indulge outside so long as they didn't produce illegitimate children? Did he not consider how his own daughter must feel hearing such insinuations? Or did he view pureblood marriages as nothing more than practical arrangements, not bonds of loyalty? If she recalled correctly, Cygnus had been born in 1938 and his eldest daughter, Bellatrix, in 1951. This old man had likely been promiscuous even at Hogwarts. What right did he have now to judge others? Cygnus continued without meeting Samantha's eyes. "A child born with a blemish like that is likely to be weak, maybe not live long. Wouldn't you say, Lucius?" Those words cut even without a glance. Samantha felt the chill of being looked down on. In her current precarious position, any pureblood elder could trample her. Even the Black family was not above that scorn. In Cygnus's eyes, she was merely an eyesore. He could not know that black blood also flowed through her veins. Lucius finally snapped back, his voice controlled but firm. "I think Samantha is perfectly healthy and will grow up just fine." He had humored Cygnus for Narcissa's sake up until now, but he would not stand for public humiliation. In front of a room full of guests, the head of the Malfoy family would not be pushed around by his father-in-law. "My own father said he would see Samantha married well one day. She is a lady of the Malfoy household," Lucius added, smiling with a meaning that left no room for argument. "In time, she and Draco will look after each other." He finished more softly. "We elders will all pass away eventually. The path ahead will be theirs to walk together." Small note. The birth years of Cygnus and Bellatrix referenced here are taken from the House of Black family tree on the Harry Potter wiki. 46. Birthday Party, 16. The silent guests exchanged looks, some surprised, some calculating, some appraising, some thoughtful. Cygnus's face darkened several shades at Lucius's words. Lucius had not only contradicted him outright, but had tacked on a final barb that implied an elder would die of old age. Lucius was only just over 30, Who else could he have meant but Cygnus? Cygnus Black replied through clenched teeth, "Lucius, you're still young. Watch your tongue." His eyes narrowed. At that moment, a pleasant female voice chimed in from the table. "Narcissa, Lucius, when will you invite us to sit?" "I'm getting a bit hungry," Madame Zabini said. Her smiling face, lit by the chandeliers, seemed to glow. No one found her interruption abrupt. In fact, several of the gentlemen stared at her so openly they had to be nudged back to manners by their neighbors. A beauty's suggestion is hard to refuse, and her remark successfully broke the tension. Narcissa and Lucius led the way to the main table, while Cygnus, with little regard for etiquette, took the honored seat immediately beside Lucius. By rank and influence, there were many more fitting candidates for that place than Cygnus Black, but Lucius only offered a faint smile and said nothing. The rest of the guests were seated in the courtyard, where little enchanted candles hovered in the air and kept the space from feeling cold or desolate. The mansion's doors were open, so those outside could see the high table and even hear Lucius speak. Glasses clinked between host and visitor as course after course arrived. Samantha stopped paying attention to Cygnus long before the meal ended. She was far too busy worrying over every small detail of her table manners. Banquets like this were a form of torture. She couldn't lean her back against the chair. She had to sit perfectly straight. Even with flaky pastries, she couldn't lean forward. Only a small nod was allowed when sipping soup. She couldn't ignore anyone on either side of her, even among the children. She had to answer every question from the elders and answer smoothly. Yet at the table, certain subjects were forbidden: money, work, health, private matters, marital affairs, politics, religion, so every sentence could be a potential minefield. Some tried to hide their awkwardness by drinking, but a 2-hour banquet left no real breaks. Better to sip sparingly than risk an embarrassing trip to the restroom. By the end, Samantha was barely keeping her smile in place. Draco, opposite her, sat as immaculately as she did, but his cheeks were puffed out. He was clearly gritting his teeth. Finally, the banquet drew to a close. At Narcissa's signal, the lights in the hall dimmed, and Samantha felt as if she'd been granted a reprieve. In the darkness, she quietly stretched her numb back. Around her, other figures moved. Everyone was equally exhausted. One by one, colorful orbs rose from the corners of the house to a graceful melody, drifting and swaying until they hung like lanterns from the dark ceiling. 47. Birthday Party, 17. 6 shimmering golden orbs flew to Draco's side, and only then did everyone notice that a giant 7- or 8-story-tall, tower-shaped birthday cake had appeared before the young master. The 6 orbs melted into 6 candles that hovered over the cake. Narcissa smiled, the candlelight softening her features. "You should make a wish, little dragon." Draco's face brightened. The little adult, who had sat rigidly all evening, suddenly showed the liveliness of a 6-year-old. He shut his eyes, pressed his hands together, and stood silently before the cake for about 10 seconds, then blew out the candles with a single strong puff. The magical flames died instantly and burst into a shower of cool, sparkling light that formed a giant happy birthday in the air. The cake split itself into neat portions that flew to everyone's plates. The guests applauded Draco, Samantha among them. At that moment, her peripheral vision landed on a familiar figure, a silent man sitting at the far end of the long table, half in shadow, making no move as if he intended to disappear into the darkness. His skin was pale with a faint sickly tint, and his shoulder-length black hair looked greasy. Samantha recognized him immediately. Severus Snape, one of Lucius's acquaintances, potions professor at Hogwarts and head of Slytherin House. As if sensing her stare, he turned and fixed her with a look. Those dark eyes seemed to pierce through to the soul, and Samantha hastily looked away. She didn't want to admit it, but she found him unfathomable and a little frightening. He gave the impression of someone without desire or warmth, the sort it was best to avoid. Because the children were still young, the banquet broke up completely by 9 o'clock. As hosts, the Malfoys saw everyone out. Madame Parkinson left with her house elf, and Madame Greengrass departed the same way. Samantha heard Pansy ask her mother as they were leaving whether she could write to young Master Draco. Madame Parkinson neither confirmed nor refused, seeming to encourage the idea without committing. Madame Zabini didn't stay long either. As she said goodbye, she invited Samantha to visit her home when she had time. Of course, that was 80 to 90% unlikely. A 6-year-old girl going anywhere socially had to be escorted by a female chaperone. Hoping Narcissa would take her out? That was about as likely as diamonds falling from the sky. Nearby, Goyle and Crab were being guided off by their fathers and stopped to say their farewells to Draco. Gregory Goyle asked, grinning, "Can we come again sometime? Your food is really delicious." Goyle laughed in his usual vacant way. Vincent Crabbe mumbled, "Your treehouse is fun too." "Of course you can," Draco replied. He had copied Lucius's expression about 70 or 80% accurately, and the effect, proud and a little pompous on a still childish face, made people want to smile. "As long as you two let me be your boss and stop playing with that Zabini," Draco added sternly. Blaise Zabini stepped forward then. "I was going to say goodbye, but have I come at the wrong time?" he asked, glancing at Goyle. "I haven't forgotten what I promised you this afternoon. I'll send it in a few days." 48. Birthday Party 18, bonus chapter. Draco frowned. Blaise Zabini said, "Nothing. But the Zabini family has a treehouse and even a whole set of young wizard adventure swamps and gnome mazes." Blaise smiled. "You want to be their boss? What can you offer them then?" Draco blinked. He was momentarily at a loss for words, then suddenly seemed to think of something and looked at Samantha. "Your father said he'll marry you off someday. Whoever wants to play with me, I'll marry her to them." Samantha forced every ounce of self-control not to roll her eyes. Lucius put a hand on Draco's shoulder. "It seems Draco really likes these two friends, doesn't he?" "It's an honor for the children to be playmates with young Master Draco," one of the wizards said. Mr. Crabbe, rather sharper than Mr. Goyle, quickly intervened. Gradually, the guests began to disperse. Overall, the dinner had been nearly perfect. Of course, it would have been even smoother without Cygnus. Narcissa had carried the evening admirably, but Cygnus still left her unsettled. He always seemed to harbor some grievance about Bellatrix, and he never failed to needle his youngest daughter and son-in-law. Even as he departed, he complained to Narcissa that the red prawns they'd eaten were Iberconsa, not Conarpisa. "Father," Narcissa replied through tight politeness, "if you are frail, it's best to rest quietly from now on." Though usually patient and composed with Cygnus, Narcissa felt 3 parts anger that night. Still, she did not speak bluntly. "I will visit you regularly, and visit Bella." "It's good that you know," Cygnus said, shooting a dark look at her before sweeping his gaze over Lucius and finally stepping into the Malfoy family's fireplace. The mansion settled into silence. Only the grate changed from green to red, crackling softly. Narcissa's shoulders sagged almost visibly. Draco and Samantha, both only 6, were drooping and yawning. Lucius and Narcissa, not wanting Draco to take in the unpleasantness between Cygnus and his parents too early, turned instead to the mountain of gifts he had been eyeing all evening. "I'll have Dobby carry all those things inside for you to open slowly," Narcissa said, stroking Draco's neatly oiled pale hair, as if, after an evening like this, he were her only consolation. "Your father and I have prepared a special gift for your 6th birthday." Lucius produced a neat stack of papers. Samantha peered at them and realized they were detailed lists for several shops. "We've decided to give you a shop," Narcissa said with a smile. "You're growing up now, and you'll need to learn a bit about business. Don't be nervous. These shops have all been doing well, and the staff are in place. And if you lose a little money, it doesn't matter. Treat it like another kind of toy." Draco flipped through the papers with bright-eyed expectation. The tension and solemnity he'd felt earlier dissolved under his parents' indulgence. Samantha watched from the side, quietly astonished at how doting they were. A 6-year-old getting a shop for his birthday, several options, no pressure if he made a loss, was almost beyond belief. Many thanks to Platinum Wife for opening a membership and adding an extra chapter. 49. Birthday Party 19. How many ordinary people spend their lives dreaming of owning a small shop? To Narcissa, however, this was just another kind of toy, an opportunity to give Draco some practical experience and teach him a little about running a business. Lucius and Narcissa had clearly thought it through. They wanted to nudge Draco's interest toward commerce and cultivate whatever talent he might have for it. so they'd chosen shops a 6-year-old would find appealing. Samantha looked over the descriptions of the options in Draco's hand one by one. There was a candy shop, an ice cream parlor, a pet shop, a bookshop. Draco flipped through them, but still looked a little dissatisfied. Then he asked, plaintive and hopeful, "Father, Mother, why isn't there a broomstick shop?" Samantha fought a smile. The idea was adorable and wildly impractical. Individual broomsticks sold for hundreds of galleons. Stocking any significant inventory would mean dealing with enormous sums. No matter how doting Lucius was, he wouldn't let a 6-year-old manage that kind of capital. The shops Lucius and Narcissa had suggested were deliberately different. Low price per transaction, high foot traffic, modest cost of goods. That way Narcissa could promise Draco it didn't matter whether he made a profit or a loss. Broomsticks, though, were another story. High unit price, low sales volume, many competing brands, and rapid product turnover. What if Draco bought up hundreds of comets in a burst of enthusiasm and the Firebolt line launched a new model the next day? Such a mistake could wipe out tens of thousands of galleons in an instant. Lucius seemed to have come to the same conclusion. "Little dragon, you're still too young. When you're older and have run these shops properly, Father will consider letting you have a broomstick shop." "All right," Draco said, pouting a little, and finally chose the ice cream parlor from the list. Lucius asked gently, "Can you tell Father why you chose that one?" Draco was tired and sleepy. He had expected to pick and go back to bed, so being questioned afterward was the last thing on his mind. He racked his little brain and came up with an answer. "Because it's June and summer is coming. Ice cream will sell very well then." "Is that so?" Lucius didn't immediately praise or criticize. Narcissa, though, smiled and encouraged him. "Little Dragon is only 6, and he already knows to pick products for the season. That's very good." Lucius finally nodded. "Very well. Little Dragon, Sasha, you're both tired. Go to bed early, but Little Dragon." He looked at his son with sudden seriousness. "In future, don't blurt out things like who you want to marry Sasha to. That's too rash. A girl's reputation is important, do you understand?" "Yes, Father." Lucius's eyes flicked over to Samantha, and he remembered other moments, how she'd given several meanings to the letter G at the cold buffet earlier, and the words she'd used to help him when her dress had changed color. She was clever in ways he'd not fully appreciated. If a marriage were ever arranged, Samantha's value would exceed matching her off with the likes of Crabbe or Goyle. Lucius's mind ran its calculations, but his warning stood: reputation mattered. Author, many thanks to Elegy 1314 for becoming a member, adding an extra chapter. 50. Bet. Bonus chapter. Draco bowed and said goodnight to his parents. As he dipped his head, he made a deliberately sour face at Samantha. She returned the glare without missing a beat. Once they were well out of earshot of Lucius and Narcissa and had climbed the stairs, Draco lost his composure. "It's you again. I'm being chided by Father because of you," he snapped. Samantha cocked her head. "What does that have to do with me?" "You said I'd have to marry Crabbe or Goyle," Draco shot back. "You set me up." "The words about marrying you off were yours," Samantha said coolly. "I didn't lay a trap. Besides, was Father's half-finished line even a scolding? You're so dramatic." "Delicate? You call me delicate?" Draco's face flushed, and in a sudden movement, he tore the blue anemone from Samantha's hair, hurled it to the floor, and ground it under his boot twice. "I won Quidditch this afternoon. You and Zabini, you only win the treasure hunts the girls play. You two are the delicate ones." Samantha stared at the crushed flower and felt a real pang of pity. She shook her head and started past him toward her room. "Hey, stop right there," Draco barked. When she paused and glanced back, he seemed unsure what to say. "You haven't given me my birthday present yet," he blurted after a few seconds. "Hurry up and get it to me." "Father and Madam gave you a shop," Samantha said, incredulous. "Gifts from guests are piled like a small mountain in your garden, and you're asking me for a present? Just take good care of your ice cream shop," she added, then smiled to herself. "I bet your shop will be closed by winter." "You're talking nonsense." Draco reddened further. "The weather's getting hotter every day. I'll make a fortune this summer. You'll see what a Malfoy child can do." "An ice cream shop will do fine in summer," Samantha conceded. "But what about autumn? British summers are short. Father didn't praise what you said earlier. Aren't you going to think about that? I, Draco snapped. That's a business secret. I'm not telling you. Samantha waved a hand as if dismissing him. Whatever. When you can't keep it running by November, don't come asking me for help. Who would ask you? Draco began, then paused as his expression twisted into a sulk. A gift. You still owe me a birthday gift. You haven't given me gifts for the past 5 years, Samantha reminded him. If anyone owes anyone, you owe me 5 first. I've given you so many things, all the rubbish you didn't want, she finished for him. Still, she beckoned. Come with me. For what? To give you your present, of course. Are you afraid to come? Who says I'm scared? Draco stalked after her. Neither of them noticed Lucius and Narcissa climbing the stairs behind them. The older couple exchanged a look and quietly followed at a distance. Back in Samantha's room, she took a small bottle with the label torn off from the cabinet. She poured a brown liquid into a glass and handed it to Draco. Drink, she said. It's your birthday present. I didn't even want to drink it myself. She hesitated for a moment, reluctant to part with the cup, then extended it. Author's note: many thanks to Su Xianing for becoming a patron. An extra chapter has been added. 51. Poisoning. Draco held the cup at arm's length, watching the tiny bubbles rise and pop with a mixture of disgust and confusion. Can you drink this? He asked. Drink it if you want, Samantha said. If you don't, give it to me quickly. It won't taste as good once it loses its fizz. She reached for the cup, and Draco suddenly took a big gulp. He immediately spat the brown liquid across the floor with a choking sound. This is... With a bang, Samantha's door was thrown open and Narcissa rushed in. Her expression changed when she saw the still bubbling liquid spilled on the floor. Without a word, she slapped Samantha hard. You heartless wretch, how dare you poison Draco, Narcissa cried. Samantha froze, not even raising a hand to cover her face. 5 bright red palm prints marked her cheek. For a moment, she didn't feel the pain, only the shock. Narcissa gathered Draco into her arms. My little dragon, are you all right? Where do you hurt? Is your stomach upset? Did you throw it up? She hugged him tightly, checking him anxiously, while calling to Lucius. Quick, call a healer. No, we're going to St. Mungo's right now. Draco looked startled by his mother's panic. He sat in her arms, a little pale. Samantha finally came to her senses. Her cheek burned and one ear rang as if she were underwater. This isn't poison, she said. It's just a carbonated drink, cola. Almost all Muggle children drink it. She explained that to Lucius without turning to Narcissa. Lucius only glanced at her and said, Sissy, take our little dragon to St. Mungo's for a checkup. I'll have Severus come over now to examine this drink. He's still in my study. Narcissa left with Draco like a whirlwind. As she swept past, Draco cast a quick look at Samantha, then was carried away and disappeared. Severus Snape arrived shortly after. He held the remaining drink under his nose, sniffed it, performed a few diagnostic spells, and told Lucius with an even tone, This is not poison. It's harmless. If anything, it contains far too much sugar. He glanced around, took in the mess on the floor and the blazing handprint on Samantha's cheek, and understood at once what had happened. But Snape never meddled in others' family affairs. He gave Lucius a curt nod and left. About half an hour later, Narcissa returned through the fireplace with Draco. She looked exhausted, but considerably more relieved. The healer said he's fine, she reported, watching the boy who had already fallen asleep in the carriage. We should still observe him. Who knows about chronic issues? That's enough, Sissy, Lucius said, frowning as he looked from his wife to Samantha. After her brief explanation to him earlier, the 6-year-old had stood silently at the edge of the room. No crying, no protest, only a cold, steady gaze that chilled the air. Samantha, you're tired too. Go rest, Lucius added, as if he had more to say but chose not to. Sire, madam, good night. Samantha curtsied and withdrew. 52. Planning. Her posture was immaculate, as if the evening's upheaval had never happened. Quietly, step by step, she walked into her bedroom, shut the door, and, still wearing her gown and ignoring the mess on the floor, collapsed onto the bed. If she had once half considered the Malfoys' upbringing and treated the Blacks as only a survival option, at that moment she gave up on them entirely. Samantha lay still for a long beat, counting the embossed petals on the ceiling until her emotions finally settled. Then she began to work through the problem in her head. If she wanted to break free from the Malfoys, she needed enough money to live on until she came of age. Enough so she wouldn't end up begging on the streets. Rent, basic food and clothing, miscellaneous fees and school books, an emergency fund for illness or accident. Even if she could find a well-paying job right after leaving Hogwarts at 17, planning for the next 11 years meant she would need at least 10,000 galleons to avoid living hand-to-mouth. With inflation factored in, cutting expenses wasn't going to get her there. She thought of the Gringotts account she had Dobby open in secret and of the few hundred galleons she'd managed to save from pocket money. It was clear she needed to increase her income. So she had two options: either find a rapid source of income for herself, or find a way back to the Black family and legitimately inherit its vault, at least Regulus's portion. If Evan Rosier's main buyer for his sister had been Regulus back then, the Blacks ought to be at least as wealthy as the Malfoys. She rolled over, let her hair fall free, and massaged her aching scalp. Her cheeks were still hot and swollen. They would certainly be puffy in the morning. She didn't care. She would parade those swollen cheeks and the 5 finger marks on her face in front of the Malfoys tomorrow and make them taste a little of their own cruelty. There was the matter of a guardian to resolve. Even if she left the Malfoys, as long as Sirius Black remained in Azkaban, she had no legal blood guardian. If she revealed her identity now, the Black family's state meant her guardian would be Narcissa, or worse, Cygnus. After the banquet and that slap, she refused to fall into either of their hands. To get Sirius out of prison, she had to investigate what had really happened that year. If her great-uncle truly was a depraved murderer, then perhaps he should stay behind bars. But if something else had been hidden in those events, Samantha thought of Lucius's past dealings and of what she knew about Minister Fudge. If a high-ranking Death Eater like Lucius could be acquitted, then surely Sirius might still be able to escape his sentence. Author's note: thank you all for your messages and for loving this story. I'm traveling during the National Day holiday, so I'm squeezing updates in wherever I can. This book is currently updated once a day. I can't promise an exact hour, but I'll try to post as early as possible. I recommend checking around 10:30 p.m. Most days the chapter is up by then. I know some readers have limited time on their phones. After my other book finishes, around late October, I'll be able to focus more on this one and post more frequently. Feel free to add me to your favorites for now. P.S. I'm typing on my phone while queuing for food, waiting in line, and riding in cars, so the pace is a bit slow. Thanks for your understanding. When my schedule eases up, I might add an extra update. Chapter 53, Money, Money, Money. Bonus chapter. As Samantha thought, her mind twisted and turned until she fell into a deep sleep on her small bed at some unknown hour. Before drifting off, she had fixed one conviction firmly in place. No matter what, her most important task right now was to make money. With money, she could gain independence and stop being controlled by others. With money, she could hire a private detective to look into Sirius Black's case. With money, she could smooth things over at the Ministry of Magic and get her great-uncle out of prison. With money, even if she returned to the Black family, she wouldn't have to put up with anyone's moods. With money, she could live like Mrs. Zabini. With money, she could even investigate how Regulus really died. Perhaps because her last thoughts before sleep were about money, Samantha dreamed she had turned into a tiny niffler standing before a mountain of galleons, her small pouch unable to hold a single coin. Anxiety built until she broke into a sweat and woke in a panic. The clock's hour hand had already passed 7. She sat up and drew back the curtains. Dobby materialized with a bottle of ointment in his hands. "Miss Sasha, Dobby will help you apply the medicine," he said, eyes already beginning to glisten. He looked at her, and his large green eyes filled with tears. Samantha was momentarily unnerved by his strong reaction. She turned her head instinctively to the gap in the bathroom door and caught sight of herself in the mirror. The red marks on her face were worse than she'd expected. A 6-year-old's skin was so delicate, and after a night of bruising, half her face looked almost unrecognizable. She moved her ears and jaw, testing her hearing and her bones, and reassured herself they were all right. No ointment yet, Dobby, she said. After the initial shock, Samantha felt a quiet satisfaction. She had already been hurt. It would be more useful if the effect were dramatic and lasting. Give me a hairstyle that looks energetic and shows my whole face. Find me a suitable dress. I'm going down to breakfast with Father and Madam. She bit the two titles like she was grinding them between her teeth. Dobby hurried to comb her hair and change her clothes. By the time Samantha walked downstairs, Lucius, Narcissa, and Draco were already seated. Narcissa shot her a cold glance as if to scold her for being late, but when she saw Samantha's face, she froze for a heartbeat and then turned away, saying nothing, as if whatever had entered the room wasn't Samantha at all, but a draft. Predictable. Samantha sneered inwardly. How could a Lady Malfoy show concern for an illegitimate child? An apology was out of the question. Lucius was the next to put down his copy of the Daily Prophet. He, too, flinched at the marks on her face, then frowned. Why haven't you taken care of your face? Didn't Dobby give you medicine? What a sight for a girl's face to be like this. Samantha's inward contempt deepened. From anyone who didn't know what had happened the night before, his tone suggested the marks were her own fault, a grown-up scolding, masking embarrassment with sternness and impatience. Adults always used that trick, acting as if the child were always to blame. Many thanks to Juan Mengchucia for breaking 500 flowers, an extra chapter added. Note, screenshot timestamps do not reflect the actual dates. Chapters will be posted in order. 54. Tea talk. If a parent is the first to scold, they don't have to admit any fault for their child and can claim the moral upper hand. A ridiculous, ironic logic. Lucius added, don't go to Mr. Ryder's tutoring for the next couple of days. Wait until your face is completely healed. Draco had just finished his glass of milk. When he saw the bruise on Samantha's cheek, he choked on the drink. He coughed violently, his face flushing, and Narcissa quickly set down her knife and fork to pat his back. In the awkward silence, Samantha glided to the dining table with quiet grace, murmured a polite good morning to Lucius and Narcissa, and sat down as neat as a porcelain doll. She began to eat her fried eggs at an unhurried pace. These were eggs bought with the Malfoys' money, and each bite felt like another small victory. She found she was suddenly very hungry, even with Narcissa and Lucius watching. Draco managed to catch his breath and expelled the milk in a final cough. Tears from the choking still pooled in his eyes, and his face was flushed from lack of air, but he stared only at Samantha's face. What happened to your face? He began, then faltered. He remembered the slap Narcissa had given Samantha the night before. He'd been taken to the hospital afterward and given a draught of peace. By the time he woke and saw Samantha again, it was already morning. He hadn't expected the slap to be that bad, yet he also knew Narcissa couldn't reasonably be blamed for it. He asked, hesitantly, "Does it hurt?" As soon as the words were out, he realized how pointless they were. Of course it hurt. Her cheek was swollen. Samantha simply looked at him and smiled faintly. The answer was obvious. Lucius, unable to let it drop, cleared his throat and asked, "Is it very serious?" His eyes begged for a reassuring no. Samantha understood immediately. Lucius wanted her to be sensible, to downplay the incident. She could have confronted them, but she was still in the Malfoy house. Making a scene would only make things worse and leave her with no justice. Instead, she filed the grievance away and decided to use it to her advantage. Lucius was a shrewd man. If she behaved, he might reward her. As the younger daughter, her greatest weapon was not a sharp tongue, but being lovable. Sometimes retreating was the best way forward. So Samantha turned to Lucius with half of her face bruised and swollen and adopted an expression of understanding, obedience, and resigned compromise. Her eyes were a little red. "I'm fine, Father," she said. "I was in pain all night and couldn't sleep, but I don't think the lady hit me on purpose. This will heal in 3 to 5 days. I'll stay quietly at home and won't tell anyone that the lady hit me." Lucius was momentarily at a loss for words. Her answer pleased him, but it also felt uncomfortably clever. He found himself wondering whether there was some hidden meaning in her words, and then immediately dismissed the thought. She was only 6. She couldn't possibly be that cunning. 55. Retreat as an advance. Lucius's heart softened a little as he thought about how Samantha had been in too much pain to sleep the night before. But admitting fault to a child was out of the question, and he certainly wasn't going to blame Narcissa. So he skirted the issue. "Sasha, your birthday's coming up. What would you like as a present?" he asked. "How about you give me a shop too, father?" Samantha asked with a smile. She watched Lucius's face stiffen and felt a cold sneer curl in her chest, but she said aloud, "Actually, I'll love any gift you give me." She already knew she wouldn't get something on the same scale as Draco's gift. She was simply reminding Lucius that if Draco had been given a shop, her present couldn't be shabby. By planting that seed, she made it awkward for him to offer her a doll or a dress, and by taking a step back now, her later, smaller requests would be easier to accept. Lucius considered for a moment, then answered, "That idea you mentioned yesterday, the dress that changes color with time and light, is excellent. I'll find a tailor and a spellmaster to research it. I don't think such a dress will lack customers. For your birthday this year," he continued, "I'll give you one of those dresses and 100 galleons as a creativity bonus. How does that sound, Sasha?" 100 galleons was a lot for a 6-year-old. Samantha's pocket money had never been much, and her secret savings over the years didn't reach 1,000 galleons. The Samantha who hadn't been slapped might have accepted meekly, but now that she'd resolved to earn her own money and to leave the Malfoy household early, she wouldn't take Lucius's terms at face value. Did he think she was that easy to buy off? Did he really think 100 galleons could purchase her idea? "Father, don't give me so much at once," she said, keeping her smile sweet and sensible. "I'm afraid I'll spend it recklessly. And I don't even know how good this idea truly is," she added obediently. "How can you reward me that much without knowing if it'll pay off? It wouldn't be right if it lost money. Just give me 1 nut for every dress like this you sell in the future." Lucius's expression froze. The easiest business in the world, he thought, was women's fashion. Noblewomen were always short a dress, a new pair of shoes, another bag, a hat, flowers, jewelry. Witches were no different. The purchasing power of pure-blood ladies was not to be underestimated. Produce this dress, and he would not lack customers. If he controlled inventory properly, losses were unlikely. Combine it with the touching backstory Samantha had suggested about Mr. and Mrs. Malfoy, and it would bring in a fortune while burnishing the family's image, useful for his path to rehabilitation. He thought of applying for a patent, of greasing the right ministry palms, of which spellmaster to trust, which tailor shop to partner with exclusively, but he had never considered giving Samantha a share of the profits. Even the 100 galleons had been an impromptu concession to avoid too glaring a disparity between his children. Now, she wasn't asking for a one-time sum. She wanted a commission on every sale. Although she only asked for 1 nut, the very notion of sharing the proceeds with his daughter stopped him cold. 56. Chasing after Lucius looked at Samantha, a flicker of doubt in his eyes. This child, so young, actually understood long-term profit sharing in a business deal? Was it a lucky guess? 1 nut per dress wouldn't make much difference to him now. But if the dresses sold well and continued to sell for years as new designs were introduced, that share could one day exceed 100 galleons. Should he agree? His gaze drifted to the faint mark on Samantha's cheek, and he thought of the shop Draco had been given. After a few seconds' hesitation, he spoke. "All right, so be it." Samantha swallowed the mouthful of egg, smiled slightly. She had been expecting that answer. "Oh, and father," she added, "since the dresses can change color with light and time, the same magic could be applied to matching gloves, hats, hair accessories, fans, even lipsticks." She feigned ignorance perfectly, using the body of a 6-year-old to her advantage. "Of course, I suppose you've already thought of that, haven't you?" Lucius's hand, resting on the dining knife, paused for a beat, but it was clear he had already factored those items into his plans. From the other end of the long table came Narcissa's cool voice. "She certainly has a lot of little tricks. No wonder she brought home those ill-gotten goods. I didn't realize the Malfoys were so short of milk and juice that you'd let Draco try such disgusting muggle drinks," Narcissa snapped. "I apologize, madam," Samantha replied evenly, "but muggle products are not necessarily disgusting. Muggles can be worked with, and Muggle money can certainly be earned. The Malfoys have a long history of business dealings with the Muggle world. Even if you don't like Muggles, there's no reason to be so opposed to their products. Narcissa was about to retort when Lucius cut in. Sasha is right. There are some good things among Muggle products. He glanced at the porcelain vases, the hand-rolled cigars, and the fine black tea on the shelf, then softened his tone and sided with his wife. However, don't drink strange things again. If you need anything, tell Madam. Do you hear me? Yes, Father. Samantha set down her fork, finished her breakfast in silence, bowed formally, and slipped away from the table. The corridor was quiet. Samantha walked with her head down, ignoring the curious looks of the portraits. Her mind was already calculating how much profit Lucius's products could bring. Autumn and winter would bring at least 2 major shopping seasons for women's clothes, and the start of school in early September would bring a wave of student customers. If Lucius launched a girls' line at the same time and added accessories and beauty items, the numbers were promising. A series of quick footsteps on the floor interrupted her thoughts. The crisp clatter of small boots in this vast house could belong to only one person. Samantha turned and saw Draco hurrying to catch up, breathless. "Is something wrong?" she asked, a little cold. He stared at her face, conflicted, then finally gritted his teeth and said, very softly, "I'm sorry." "What did you say?" Samantha asked. She hadn't heard him clearly. His voice had been too low, his mouth barely moving. "I'm sorry," he repeated, louder this time, stamping his foot in frustration. 57. Weasel and Quail. "What do you have to apologize for?" Samantha snapped. She didn't want to admit her eyes had filled with tears at a single word from Draco, so she made her tone colder instead. Draco took another step closer, lowering his voice. Mother shouldn't have hit you last night." He flushed, clearly embarrassed and ashamed to have said it. By Narcissa's standards, he didn't need to apologize to Samantha, let alone to this low-status girl. But seeing the scars on Samantha's face, he found he couldn't ignore them. And after all, last night's incident had been sparked by his insistence on a birthday present. "That doesn't mean you should be the one apologizing," Samantha said. She couldn't truly be angry with Draco. They'd grown up together, and he hadn't been mainly responsible for what had happened. But she also would not forgive Narcissa simply because her son was sorry. "If there's nothing else, I need to go put a compress on my face. You heard Father's orders. I don't want to miss too many of Mr. Ryder's lessons." Samantha started to head for her door. "I can help you," Draco blurted. He hurried up a few steps, following her to her room. "If your face still isn't better by the day after tomorrow, I'll come back and tell you what Mr. Ryder taught." There was a hopeful eagerness on his young features. He even turned back on tiptoe and closed Samantha's door gently. "You?" Samantha's suspicion sharpened. "Leaving aside that you're usually not as quick a learner as I am, you've never been this kind before." She studied Draco Malfoy. He was acting oddly. Narcissa had raised him to be competitive. He would spar with her in every class, and if he ever fell short of praise, he'd try some petty prank afterward, though it never worked. But today he'd apologized and offered to tutor her. It was a first. Samantha felt like a quail watched by a weasel. "What exactly do you want?" she asked. "I don't want anything," Draco snapped, as if annoyed that his thoughts had been read. "You don't want anything? Then get out." Samantha pointed to the door. Draco went suddenly speechless, his face going scarlet. He stood there for a long moment, struggling, then compromised. "I wanted to ask you about that thing from yesterday. Do you still have any?" "What thing?" Samantha asked. She didn't recall Draco ever stammering before. That spicy sweet muggle drink you gave me." Draco's face burned as red as a pomegranate. The noble pureblood heir of the Malfoy family had actually stooped to ask someone for something, and a cheap, unknown drink at that. The most humiliating detail was that it was a muggle product. Yet ever since he woke that morning, his tongue had replayed its taste. In the sweltering June heat, no drink had ever seemed so good, so refreshing, as if it had cooled his whole body. Even the tiny bubbles on his tongue had felt wonderful in memory. Could muggles really make something so magical? He had regretted spilling so much on the floor the night before. Now he was desperate to taste it again, even if only a single tiny sip. Samantha read his thoughts and spread her hands. It's gone. After that young nobleman was poisoned yesterday, the bottle of cola was thoroughly inspected and disposed of long ago. Thinking she might never be allowed to have cola again, Samantha wasn't very sympathetic. Besides, Mother called it a disgusting muggle drink. Father told me not to drink random things. How could I keep it? Draco's face fell. Completely gone. He brightened quickly and leaned forward, curiosity overcoming his disappointment. Where did you get it? How did you buy it? Can muggles order by owl? We could buy more secretly. Forget it. Samantha was part annoyed, part amused. If Mother found out, you'd be fine, but I'd be ruined. I'd be the great sinner who led you astray. She pulled the door open and pushed Draco out of her room. Stop thinking about cola. Worry about your shop. She slammed the door, leaving Draco standing in the hallway, his expression torn between longing and practicality. 2 short months passed. August arrived with a cool downpour and Samantha's 6th birthday. Whether Lucius wanted to make amends a little, or the new dress line had simply been very profitable, Samantha's birthday wasn't ignored this year. There was no grand ball, but Lucius had Dobby prepare a small family dinner, ordered a 2-tier cake, and gifted her a specially made color-changing dress. True to his word, he'd also opened a Gringotts account for her, 1 nut for every item sold. More than 10 galleons had already been deposited, and it was expected to grow. Sasha is truly very clever, Lucius said, beaming. He was in a good mood and went on. Many ladies have already placed advance orders for autumn and winter, dresses, robes, trench coats. Your little treasury will be padded even more than the 100 galleons I promised. Thank you, Father. It's all thanks to your excellent management. I only suggested an idea. Samantha lifted her glass. Of course, hers and Draco's contained only red grape juice. Here's to your continued success, and to me enjoying a little of the spoils as pocket money. Lucius smiled and sipped. He was pleased with his daughter's recent achievements. If only she had been Narcissa's child, he thought, the satisfaction would have been complete. Narcissa cut into the moment, offering Draco an opening. Draco, didn't you tell me about the ice cream shop yesterday? Why don't you ask your father? Samantha set her glass down and quietly ate the cake in front of her. Draco took the cue. He hadn't interrupted anything so much as seized a chance. Father, he began, my ice cream shop was so busy in July that I had the manager hire 2 extra assistants. But next month it'll get colder and business will slow. I'm thinking about whether to let them go. 1 galleon, 17 sickles, equal 493 nuts. 59, birthday gift, bonus chapter. Lucius asked, what are you thinking? He countered, adding that of course he prized his only son more than any daughter. Draco replied, I think dismissing them is a bit harsh, but their monthly wage is 45 galleons each, and together they cost nearly 100 galleons. Lucius asked again, how was the shop doing before? At that, Draco brightened. Business was very good. After deducting all costs and taxes, the net profit for June and July alone was almost 1,000 galleons. Lucius nodded with some satisfaction. His son, though young, had not managed things carelessly. The shop even had a surplus. He had hoped Draco wouldn't lose money, and now it seemed that with proper guidance, this boy could do well. Still, his approach was a little naive and needed correction. Do you think the shop will do as well after August? Lucius pressed. Draco hesitated. He had considered the question before. The store manager had hinted as much, worried Draco's expectations were too high. Samantha had even predicted he wouldn't last past November. Lucius said, from September until the peak season next June, that's 9 or 10 months. Are you going to use all your surplus from June and July to support 2 idle people? He looked at Draco meaningfully. We're running a business, not a charity. When it's time to make a decision, you can't be soft. Find a good excuse, and it won't have to be you who fires them. The manager can do it. Yes, Father, Draco said, making up his mind. Lucius had more to say. For example, that when hiring he should have used short-term contracts, but he didn't want to discourage his son too much, so he let it pass. The conversation soon shifted to Draco and Samantha's studies, and the small family dinner drew to a close. Samantha didn't stay long. She kept thinking about another gift in her room, a package stamped with a cursive Z, the Zabini crest. Since Draco's birthday party, she and Blaze had remained in contact. Lucius hadn't interfered. he likely appreciated the Zabini family's wealth. For her part, Samantha considered Blaze only a friend she could spend time with. She hadn't thought anything beyond that. Many people wrote to Draco. Crabbe and Goyle's handwriting was unmistakable, almost troll-like. Pansy Parkinson's letters came like falling snow, one a day, though Draco barely bothered to open them. Theodore Knott sent the occasional note, more out of polite habit than anything else. Samantha couldn't avoid making friends entirely. That would have seemed overly reclusive. Her options were limited, and Blaze, who was neither foolish nor prejudiced toward her, was the most suitable companion. She sat on her bed and tore open the wrapping. Aside from the Malfoys and Dobby, this was the first time she had received a birthday gift from outside the house. Inside the exquisite box were blue anemones enchanted with a sticking charm, and in the center lay a blonde doll in a blue dress that looked very much like Samantha had at Draco's birthday. Underneath the box were several thick, large books. Author's note: many thanks to Camp ZZ for becoming a member and adding an extra chapter. Sorry for the long wait. Happy birthday, Samantha. The card read that, in Blaze Zabini's smoothly looping hand, already far too neat for a 6-year-old. Last time I was in Diagon Alley, he had written, I saw this doll in a shop window that looked a lot like you, so I'm giving it to you as a birthday present. No one else deserves to own it but you. Regarding the things you mentioned in your previous letter, I also found a few reference books that I hope will be helpful to you. P.S. It's a pity you can't come to my house to play. Mother mentioned you a few days ago. She recently ordered many new color-changing fabrics and ready-to-wear clothes from the Malfoy family, not only for herself but to sell in South America and Egypt. Perhaps your nut savings will see a few more entries. I wish us, as you said, common prosperity. Your loyal Blaze Zabini. Samantha set the card down and picked up the doll. It was exquisitely made, so much so that the more she studied it, the more she felt it was a miniature of herself. The light blonde hair pinned up the same way, the pale blue dress with the tiny pendant that matched the one she had worn to Draco's birthday. What were the odds? She smoothed the doll's skirt and felt for a maker's mark. There, tucked into the seam, was a small recessed bear's head. If her memory served, that emblem belonged to a famous French toy customizer. Everything he made was expensive and unique, handcrafted and one of a kind. Diagon Alley, a shop window. The coincidence made Samantha smile. She set the doll aside and opened the stack of heavy books Blaze had left. They were almost all about wizarding tax law, Gringotts, wizarding currency, and the financial system, each one thick and dense enough to be a particular kind of weight on her lap. The bulkiest bore the title Wizard Currency Forging and the Goblin Wizard Economic Agreement, but when she opened it, the flyleaf read Pure Blood Families, Examples of Inheritance and Property Distribution. Her fingers stopped on that line. She had mentioned once, in passing, asking about a daughter's inheritance rights. She hadn't expected anyone to remember, let alone a child, yet here was a book that suggested Blaze had taken her seriously, perhaps too seriously. He must have misunderstood her intention, imagining she planned some scheme against Draco's family. In truth, she only wanted to know how much she might legally inherit from the Black estate. Sirius Black had been disowned, but he was alive. Legally, he was the only male heir of the Black line. A sharp knocking cut through her thoughts. Bang, bang, bang! Startled, Samantha had only a moment to shove the inheritance book back into the pile when the door was pushed open and Draco strode in. "What are you hiding in here?" he demanded, scanning the room. His eyes fell on the gift box on her bed. He took 2 quick steps and snatched up the delicate doll. "Who let you in?" Samantha snapped, grabbing for it, but he was faster. "I knocked," Draco said, as if that settled everything. "I didn't say come in," she shot back, bristling. Draco examined the doll, turning it over in his hands, then reached for the card.